I buried my best friend. Then he knocked on my door. I know how that sounds. People hear me say it and think I've lost my mind, that it's just some ghost story a lonely old man tells himself. But it's not. I saw the coffin. I remember the rain that day, steady and cold. I remember how the dirt clung to my boots as I stood there, telling myself that this was the end of the story. 20 years passed. The world changed. But some ghosts don't follow time. And one night, when the wind was quiet enough to hear my own heartbeat, someone knocked on my door. Slow, heavy, certain. I opened it, and there he was. The same eyes that used to find me in the smoke. The same crooked grin that could pull laughter out of a dying day. My best friend, the man I had buried with my own hands. He didn't say a word, just smiled, like the years hadn't touched him. That was the moment. I knew the past doesn't stay buried, it just wakes. But before I tell you what happened that night, you need to understand who he was, what we were, and what the war did to us. There are some sounds you never forget. The ring of a shovel against hard earth. The hum of a name whispered into the wind. The way silence feels after the last shot's been fired. I used to think time could dull it, that if you waited long enough, the noise would fade. But it doesn't. It just burrows deeper. My name's James, though no one's called me that in years. Most folks around here just say sir or old man. But once, a lifetime ago, there was someone who called me Jimmy. Only one man ever did, and I buried him 20 years ago. His name was Tom Hale, and I still remember the day I met him like it was yesterday. We were both just boys then, barely 20, carrying rifles that felt heavier than ours. Bodies. The war had chewed through the first wave of soldiers and was hungry for more. Tom showed up at camp with that same crooked smile he'd wear right up until the end. You know the kind, like the world hadn't yet convinced him to stop hoping. Who's the loud one? The guy who'd hum old country songs while cleaning his gun. He'd tell stories around the fire, stories that didn't matter, about girls back home, cars he'd never fix, a dog that used to chase him to school. But they mattered to us because they made the world feel normal, even just for a few minutes. He had this way of making you forget where you were. Even when shells were falling in the distance, he'd find a reason to laugh. I wasn't like him. I was quieter, didn't talk unless I had to. Tom said I looked like a preacher stuck in the wrong war. Maybe he was right. We got paired together during training. Same squad, same tent, same everything. The kind of bond you don't choose. It just happens. You share food, fear, and silence until you stop being two men and start being one story. And ours, it started with a promise. It was the night before our first real deployment. Cold wind, thin fire, the kind of night that makes you think too much. Tom handed me half of his dog tag chain, said if one of us doesn't make it, the other keeps both halves. That way we're not lost. He grinned like it was nothing. But I knew it wasn't nothing. I still remember the weight of that half chain in my hand. It felt heavier than the rifle slung over my shoulder. Our first mission was supposed to be simple: patrol and report. But war doesn't care what's supposed to happen. It has its own plans. We walked into a fog that morning, so thick it felt alive. Couldn't see more than 10 feet ahead. And when the first bullet snapped through the air, it felt like the world just decided to stop pretending. Everything after that was chaos. Men yelling, dirt exploding, the smell of iron and smoke and fear. Tom and I got separated from the others, pinned behind a collapsed wall, with rounds tearing through what was left of the street. He looked at me, face streaked with mud and sweat, and said, "We'll make it out, Jimmy." "We always do." I nodded, but my hands were shaking. When the explosion hit, it didn't sound real. It was more like the earth exhaled and forgot to stop. I remember being thrown back, sky, dirt, blood, everything swirling. When I came to, I couldn't hear anything, just a ringing. And the smell. God, that smell of burnt metal and flesh. I crawled through the rubble calling his name. Over and over. Tom. Tom. But there was nothing. When they found me hours later, they pulled me away from the crater. Said no one could have survived it. They buried what they found in a flag. Said the rest was gone. I didn't argue. Didn't cry. Didn't say a word. I just put both halves of the dog tag chain around my neck and swore I'd carry it till I couldn't. After the war, life didn't restart. It just kind of limped forward. I came home to a town that looked the same, but didn't feel the same. Everyone wanted to talk about heroes and victory. No one wanted to talk about the nights you woke up screaming, or the mornings you couldn't face the light. They gave me a medal. I gave it back. People said time would heal, but time doesn't heal when you don't let it touch you. I bought a small cabin near the river where we used to fish before we shipped out. It was quiet. Too quiet. Most days, I'd sit on the porch, listening to the water, waiting for something I couldn't name. And sometimes, when the wind blew just right, I'd swear I could hear him laughing. The same laugh that used to echo across the trenches. Years passed like that. Seasons came and went. Neighbors moved away. The world moved on. But I stayed, half here, half there. Then one evening, cold, gray, unremarkable, I heard it. 3 knocks on my door. Slow, measured. I almost didn't answer. Most nights, no one ever came that far up the road. But something about those knocks. They weren't the kind of knocks a stranger makes. When I opened the door, the world I'd buried came back. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not weak, just folded in on himself, like life had worn him down from the edges inward. For a moment, I thought my mind had finally done it, conjured him whole, one last cruel trick before it gave out. But then he said my name. Jimmy. The voice was rough, lower, but it was his. The same tone that used to cut through the chaos when nothing else could. And in that moment, the years between us collapsed like they'd never been there at all. I didn't move, didn't speak, just stared. He smiled, small, almost hesitant, like he wasn't sure he was allowed to. "Can I come in?" he said, like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. I must have nodded because the next thing I knew, he was inside. Standing in the same room I'd spent half my life keeping empty for no reason I could ever explain. Until now. He looked around, eyes scanning the photos on the mantle, the old boots by the fire, the folded flag I never touched. His hand brushed the edge of the table like he was remembering what home felt like. "Still, got the same place," he said. His voice cracked just enough to let the truth slip through. "Yeah," I managed.
didn't see much point in leaving. He nodded, as if he understood exactly what that meant. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one my father built before the war. Neither of us spoke for a while. The silence wasn't awkward. It was heavy, sacred, the kind that only two men who'd been through hell could share. Finally, I asked, "How?" He took a deep breath, didn't look at me, just stared at his hands. "I don't know," he said.
I shouldn't be here. Then he told me. He said the blast threw him into the river trench, knocked him out cold. By the time he came to, the fight was over. Everyone gone, bodies everywhere. He tried to move, but his leg was mangled. He crawled, half-conscious, bleeding, until he found what was left of a medic tent. They said he was lucky to be alive. But luck in war's a strange thing. It saves your body and kills everything else. He spent months in a hospital across the border. No records, no name. He'd lost most of his memory. Couldn't even remember his own unit. They told me I was found wearing half a dog tag, he said quietly. I kept it. Didn't know why. Didn't even know who the other half belonged to. He looked up at me then, and for a moment I saw the boy he used to be. The light, faint but still there. I used to dream, he said, about a river and someone calling me, over and over. The same name, Tom. I didn't know it was mine. He paused, the corner of his mouth trembling. And every time I woke up, I felt wrong, like I'd left something behind. When the hospital released him, they sent him to work camps. Years passed in a blur, small towns, quiet roads, a life built out of scraps. He said sometimes he'd feel this pull, like something was calling him home, but he didn't know where home was. Then one night, years later, he found a newspaper clipping. It had my name in it, a memorial piece for fallen soldiers. It said I delivered the eulogy for my best friend, Thomas Hale. That's when I knew, he said. That was me. He smiled, but his eyes stayed wet. I don't remember the war, he whispered, but I remember you. We sat there for a long time after that. No sound but the clock ticking. I wanted to ask 100 things. Why he never tried to find me sooner, how he lived all those years, but none of it mattered. He was here, alive, and that was more than I'd dared to imagine for half my life. I got up, went to the mantel, and took down the frame I'd never opened. Inside were his letters, the ones I could never throw away. I set them on the table. He ran his fingers over the envelopes, careful, like they might tear under his touch. You kept these? Every one, I said. He smiled again, softer this time, like maybe he believed he'd been real all along. Later that night, I poured us both a drink. The first in a long time. We sat by the fire, two old men surrounded by ghosts. He told me about the places he'd drifted through, border towns, ports, mines. Said he never stayed long. Said he couldn't. I'd walk through towns, he said, and people would look at me like they'd seen a ghost. Guess maybe they had. He laughed, but there was no joy in it. Then he turned serious. You ever feel like the world moved on without you? Every day, I said. He nodded, like that was all the answer he needed. As the night deepened, he grew quieter. His eyes kept drifting to the window, to the woods beyond. The dark stretch where the river ran. You ever go back there? He asked. Once in a while, I said, when it's quiet enough to hear myself think. He smiled. I'd like to see it again. We sat there until the fire died. Neither of us said goodnight. We didn't have to. Some things don't need words. That night I barely slept. Every sound in the house felt amplified. The creak of the floorboards, the wind against the glass, the faint whisper of something I couldn't name. I kept thinking about the chain, the one around my neck. Two halves, joined again. I took it off for the first time in 20 years, laid it on the nightstand, and for a moment, I thought I felt something lift, like the air itself had been holding its breath. In the morning, the house was quiet. Sunlight spilled across the table, catching the dust in soft gold streaks. He was gone. No note, no sound, just the faint smell of smoke and a coffee cup still warm. For a second, I thought maybe I'd dreamed it all. Maybe my mind had finally blurred the line between memory and wish. But then I saw it. On the table, beside his cup, lay his half of the dog tag chain, the same one he'd given me before the war. And for the first time in years, I smiled. I didn't see him again for almost a week. The world went back to its usual silence, the kind that hums under the floorboards, the kind that keeps you awake at night. I kept looking at that dog tag on the table, kept turning it over, running my thumb across the letters. T. Hale, scratched and faded. It didn't feel real. None of it did. Sometimes I'd catch myself listening, waiting for the sound of his boots on the porch, the soft knock he'd made that first night. But it never came. Then one morning, just as the fog was lifting off the river, I saw him. He was standing by the water's edge, hands in his pockets, still as a stone. For a second, I just watched him from the porch. He looked exactly like he had before we shipped out. The same tilt of his head, the same way he leaned slightly forward, as if listening to something the rest of us couldn't hear. I walked down the path, boots crunching over frost. He didn't turn around. When I reached him, he said quietly, "You always used to get here first." I didn't answer, just stood beside him, both of us staring at the slow ripple of the current. The river hadn't changed much. Same bend, same smell of pine and mud. Same calm that made you forget there was ever such a thing as war. We used to come here before everything, back when life was still measured by how many fish we caught and how much daylight was left. Feels smaller, he said. Maybe we got bigger, I said. He smiled. Doubt it. We sat on the old fallen log by the bank, didn't speak for a long while. The sun caught the water and turned it into 1,000 shards of light. He reached into his pocket and pulled something out. A small harmonica, dented, rusted around the edges. "You remember this?" he asked. I nodded. "You used to drive me crazy with it." He laughed, the same soft, uneven laugh I'd thought I'd never hear again. "Guess I still can't play it worth a damn." He lifted it to his lips and played a few broken notes. They floated out over the water, thin, trembling, imperfect, but it was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. When he stopped, he said quietly, "They told me I died." I looked at him. He was staring at the water. His reflection shimmered, half there, half not. "I guess, in a way, I did," he continued. "When I woke up after the blast, I wasn't the same. I didn't remember who I was. I didn't remember you. I didn't even remember what side I was on." He picked up a stone and tossed it into the current. Ripples spread out, catching the sunlight. I spent years trying to figure out if I was worth saving. I didn't know what to say to that. There are some things words can't reach. After a while, he said, "I remember the moment before it happened. We were pinned down. You yelled something. I couldn't hear. And then everything went white. Thanks." He turned to me. "What did you say?" I hesitated. Then I told him. I said, "Duck." He let out a quiet laugh. Guess I wasn't fast enough. We sat there till the sun started to dip. The shadows stretched long and soft across the riverbank. He said, "You ever wonder why some of us make it out and others don't?" "All the time." He nodded. Me too, and I still don't have an answer. He looked tired then. Not in the way a man looks after a long day, but in the way a soul looks after a long life. I think, he said, slowly, that sometimes we don't come back all the way. Just the parts that need to say goodbye. He looked at me then, really looked. And in his eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen since that day in the crater. Peace. He stood up, brushed the dirt off his coat. I should be going. I frowned. Where? He smiled, that same crooked smile that used to make the worst places in the world feel survivable. Not far. Don't worry. He started walking along the bank, his boots leaving faint prints in the mud. After a few steps, he stopped and looked back. You kept your promise, he said. Then he nodded, almost to himself, and kept walking. The next morning, I went back to the river. His footprints were still there, but they stopped at the edge of the water. No others leading away. No sign of struggle. Nothing. Just the gentle sound of the current moving on, carrying whatever it had taken with it. I waited there for hours. The wind picked up, the sky darkened, but I couldn't bring myself to leave. Then I saw it, caught on a branch near the shore, a piece of metal glinting in the fading light. I reached down and pulled it free. It was his harmonica, cold, still damp, but whole, the way a man might hold proof that the impossible had once touched him. That night, I sat by the fire, the harmonica on the table beside me. I didn't play it. Didn't have to. Because somewhere, out beyond the trees, the wind carried a tune. Faint, familiar and full of something that almost felt like forgiveness. And for the first time since the war, I slept. It's been a few years since that day by the river. The seasons have turned over themselves so many times now, I've stopped keeping count. But some mornings, when the mist rolls low over the water, I still half expect to see him there. Hands in his pockets, that same quiet smile, like he never left. Maybe he didn't. I never told anyone what happened. What could I say? That a dead man came back? That a ghost knocked on my door and shared my coffee? No one would have believed me, and maybe they shouldn't. Some things aren't meant to be explained, only remembered. So I kept it to myself. The dog tag, the harmonica, the silence that followed. All of it. They sit in a wooden box on my shelf now. A box that hums with the weight of memory. There's an ache that comes from surviving. They don't tell you that when they hand you a uniform. You think the hardest part is making it out alive. It's not. The hardest part is learning how to live after you do. You spend years trying to find your place again, trying to fit into a world that forgot how to speak your language. People mean well. They thank you for your service. But they don't understand the kind of ghosts you bring home. Ghosts that don't rattle chains or slam doors. They just sit quietly beside you when the room gets too still. Some nights, I still wake up before dawn. The same hour we used to wake for patrol. Old habits die harder than men do. I pour myself a cup of coffee, sit by the window, and listen. Sometimes the wind whistles low through the trees, and if I close my eyes, I can almost hear the faintest trace of his harmonica. Off-key, but familiar. That's when I know he's near, not haunting me, just keeping me company. I went back to the river last week. The log's gone now, washed away in one of the floods a few years back. The bank's narrower, the trees thinner, but the sound of the water, it's the same as it was that morning he vanished. I stood there a long while, felt the earth under my boots, listened to the current, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. Because I realized something. We talk about war like it's a story that ends when the shooting stops. But it doesn't. It keeps going, in the spaces between breaths.
in the things left unsaid, in the faces you see when you close your eyes. And maybe, if you're lucky, it gives you one last chapter, a chance to make
Peace with what it took. When people ask me if I believe in miracles, I never know how to answer. I don't know if what happened was one. Maybe it was just a kindness, a mistake in the fabric of time, that let two old friends meet once more before the story ended. But I do believe this: not every goodbye is forever. Some just take a little longer to find their way back. Sometimes I think about that promise we made all those years ago. If one of us doesn't make it, the other keeps both halves. I kept my half for 20 years, and for a moment, I held his again. Now they both rest together, in that box on the shelf, right beside the harmonica that still smells faintly of river water. I don't talk much these days. The world's too loud for men like me. But when the nights get long, and the house too quiet, I sit by the fire and speak his name softly, not in grief anymore, but in gratitude. PP, because he came back, not to stay, but to remind me that love, real unbreakable love, doesn't stop at death. It just waits, patient as the river, quiet as the dawn, until you're ready to listen. So yes, I buried my best friend, and years later, he knocked on my door, not to return, but to remind me that even after everything, after war, after loss, after silence, some promises still keep their way home. PP, Brer, ending, P.